So in most ways, if a kid or a young adult is getting to me, it's not always that the bullying occurred in school. They could have been belittled and shamed in their own household. So I think that bullying is really common across however we want to think about it. Okay. And so even like amongst friend groups and loved ones, we talk about.
Awekenge, this is Mental Metals, hosted by Asagototo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asagototo. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
If you can be selfish about it, serve yourself. And I feel like as men, we struggle in terms of that, actually serving ourselves, because we focus a lot on outside noise. With that said, what do you think on the quote? What is your take on it?
On whether men can serve themselves, I think it's quite interesting. I think about both genders when I think about that, which is quietly men are taught growing up, and my specialty is with kids and families, is young boys are taught not to serve themselves, as are young women. And it's different the way that they're taught those things. Young men specifically are supposed to be confident, they're supposed to be strong, but they're also not supposed to step to the face of authority. And they're not supposed to step to their elders, right? And so when I say step to, I mean stand up for themselves and to self-advocate. So men, mostly in our society, are raised under a militaristic, we need you to be tough. We need you to be brave, but also don't talk back to your father. Don't talk back to the teacher. Don't talk back to your coach. And I think that stuff carries into adulthood for men, where they don't have the ability to self-advocate for themselves at the workplace, and this is with women as well. But men, then they get home, and that is what breeds a lot of negative things, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be, that stuff where if you don't feel like you can advocate yourself, well, then you're going to look to take it out on somebody who's less powerful than you are, And so that's the thing. I think men, in a different way than women, are taught to kind of know their place and know their role. And we know that women, young girls are really taught to be seen and not heard from a very young age. And so what's funny is I think you hit it right on the head, which is most people think boys are not also taught that, when truly they are as well. It just looks different.
And also, I feel like you spoke about self-advocacy. To me, it's self-advocacy. I feel like it's something that it's new. It's new to me, because I was never taught, to an environment where I grew up in, I was never taught that you should actually, as an individual, you should be actually take care of yourself. That, as a man, we are taught that you must provide only, nothing else.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And whereas when...
Where did you grow up? Aseko, where did you grow up?
Actually, I'm from South Africa.
South Africa?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's not, and just I was, I wanted to consider the cultural relevance. I don't know South African culture all that well, so I'll listen to you on how but I would like to have at least tapped into where I'm picturing this for you up, bringing up.
Okay, no problem. As I've said earlier, that in a way, I want to learn something from you, and you learn something from me. And
Totally. Yeah.
And I feel like the cultural, as you spoke about the cultural aspect, are different things, because we don't see mental health as something that is quite serious, in all honesty, because things like social media, we are able to talk about it. At the same time, people inside, they are dying, and in terms of speaking about, I love the fact that we're on this conversation, whereas it's suicide awareness month, whereas most young people kill themselves because of they feeling a certain way, and also they are bullied. And I want to get into that in terms of bullying. In your own practice, how have you came across children that have experienced bullying, and would you say how would you say that they interacted with you?
Did you say, okay, I need to hear the question again. You said children who experience bullying?
Yes. Yeah. In terms of did you receive them? How did they interact with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of ways, Aseko. I think, I'm a psychiatrist, right? And so that means that I don't love to hold a prescription pad, but if people get to me, and I really fancy myself, my podcast is all about therapy. We don't talk about medications, but if a kid ends up getting to my office, it maybe means they've worked with the school counselor and they've worked with a therapist who isn't a psychiatrist. So those are some of those differences. Now, bullying is hard. It's multifactorial, and that means that you can be bullied in your own home, Aseko. You can be bullied by your parents and by your siblings, which is not the construct that we think of when we think of bullying. So in most ways, if a kid or a young adult is getting to me, it's not always that the bullying occurred in school. They could have been belittled and shamed in their own household. So I think that bullying is really common across however we want to think about it. Okay. And so even amongst friend groups and loved ones, we talk about bullying as a love language amongst men in America. So it's like you're going to naturally belittle somebody as a way of connecting with them, as a way of, there's no real good reason we do it. And yet teasing and playful kind of mockery is extremely common, even within so let's say we're back to school with the kid, even within a friend group. There's often a more emotionally volatile kid, so emotionally volatile meaning big emotions, right? They get kind of targeted throughout their life. And that can even be by the people they consider friends. But also, of course, if they're really bad off, then it's going to be by everybody within their class. So how they present with me, I wouldn't say there's a rhyme or reason for it, Asego. I think that inevitably those kinds of people develop problems with their own self-esteem, and then they develop problems with how they view the world around them. Does this world accept me? Am I okay in this world? Do I belong in this world? And then that gets to your point of suicidal thinking. I'm a big believer that suicidality comes from a place of stuckness. So when we feel stuck and we don't know what to do and we're not sure what path to take, that is when we start to feel that self-harm and that suicidality, those streaks. And so for a kid like that, they don't know which way's up. They're getting bullied at school, but they still have to go to school. They're not accepted for who they are. Hopefully, God willing, they're accepted at their home so that their parents love them for who they are and value them at their core. But if you're not getting that from either your parents nor your peer group in school, it's a natural trend to suicidality, because who wants to feel alone? Who wants to feel isolated? Who wants to feel, we would use the term othered, especially with kids who, let's say you're a closeted gay male in a small town. You're going to feel othered the whole time until you can get into a group of people who aren't going to make you feel bad for how you feel. Right. And so that's, I think, kind of the whole of it is how they present to me. feeling pretty worthless and really undeserving of positive praise, whether it be in their own mind or from others. They don't think that they deserve that because maybe they've never gotten it and they don't know what that feels like. So why on earth would I tell them that they're doing a good job? Well, excuse me. I love to tell these kids they're doing a good job, and then a lot of them get squirrely and react weird because their internal sense of self is that they're bad because that's what they've been told by either their peers or their parents or their siblings or their weird uncle, like whatever. So yeah, it's just my way of saying that when people talk about bullying, I don't just think of the one mean kid at school who's mean to everybody around him, because we all know that adage of like hurt people hurt people. Have you heard that? Right. And so that's like the bully. This bully has insecurity. They're mean to everybody because they're, feel bad about themselves, whatever. I'm talking about, bullying happens in different forms all throughout a person's life.
And I just want to speak in terms you spoke about being in a form of violence, in a form of connecting. And it took me back because recently I was watching, I think it was on Saturday. Yes, it was on Saturday. New Zealand was playing South Africa. And we won by 127 the score. And when
was this football, soccer, or rugby? Football,
rugby.
Yeah,
Rugby. Springboks won with 127. And when the match was over, I had so much adrenaline. Whereas I'm someone that is always self-aware of himself, because when I have anger, when I am in a calm state, I am able to actually observe that I'm in this state. What I expressed when the match was over, it was the fact that I was filled with excitement, but my excitement, I expressed it in a way of violence. And it's something that I feel like it's going back to the culture. When as men, we are taught that the only emotions that we are allowed to have is anger. And even when you are feeling sad, you neglect that sadness. You actually go to that anger. Because for example, when I myself was dealing with my own mental health problems, and I had, instead of actually having that sadness, in a way, I used to, something that is my first time actually announcing this, of saying this. I used to punch the wall just to feel actually that pain, in terms of just removing that sense of that pain. Whereas I realized that after actually working on myself, that it's better to actually take care of myself. And you as a therapist, a psychotherapist, are you a therapist or?
So okay, this is the branch, right? So I'm a psychiatrist, which means, so I'm a therapist who can also prescribe medications.
Okay.
So I'm a doctor, right? But I'm the kind of doctor who talks about feelings, and sometimes, so like if you're on an antidepressant medication, or if I see somebody with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, right? So I do that stuff. But my primary interest is in thinking about a person, thinking about a family system, understanding what's going on here and all the relationship dynamics. That's the stuff that I like the most. But I'm also trained to evaluate someone's safety, like whether they need to go to the hospital or whether they need to be admitted to the hospital for their safety, and whether they need medications. That is a big part of a psychiatrist training. We're also, so like Sigmund Freud, he was a physician who then developed therapy, right? So that's what I am. I'm a psychiatrist like Freud.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I asked you that, I wanted to quote Friedrich Nietzsche, where he said, if you think someone has ruined your life, you're right, that is you. And it's something that we usually do. And instead of I understand that the society that we grew up in